join me this afternoon on a short road trip which is from the village of Tunstall down to Rendlesham. And the reason for taking you to Rendlesham today is to give you a very quick tour of the former USAF base of Bentwaters. And for anyone who's watching from the United States, first of all, good afternoon to you. If you were stationed in Suffolk during the sort of 70s and 80s, I hope this brings back some memories for you. The bases here, the twin bases of Woodbridge and Bentwaters, closed in 1992, but this was the home for the infamous Warthog, or the A10 tank buster aircraft. And where we are now is sort of almost at the end of the old runway, so I can remember in the early 1990s pulling my car over to the left here and watching the A10s come in overhead, and they'd be coming in so low you could almost see, well, not almost, you could actually see the pilots and the controls. But the first part of the journey we come to is Tunstall Common, and I ought to have mentioned that this afternoon we're in the 1967 2-litre Vitesse, and for Tess, this one, it's a bit of a homecoming because her second owner actually lived in Tunstall, and so she spent a period of her life from 1973 to 1978 in this very village before being sold to her third owner, who took her off to London. And for much of her later life she was in London and Hertfordshire, finally moving up to Staffordshire for the previous owner, before I bought her about 10 years ago and coincidentally moved her back to Suffolk, and she's now 5 miles away from where we are here. What I'll do is I'll pop a photograph of her taken in the 1970s in her former home. But she doesn't look very much different in that, actually. Tunstall's a village which, again, quite a few families from the American Air Force lived here and made their long-term homes in this village. It used to have a pub and a village shop. I say used to, it still does actually. It has the Green Man pub, which has changed hands recently. It's been through a period of turbulence. It's changed hands and I believe is now open again, so perhaps worth a visit. Two garages in this village, so one of them, Peter Teager's cars here, and some particularly good with older vehicles. So if you live in the area, you have a classic car, might be worth going and having a chat with Peter if you need help. Apologies for the low sun and for this rather messy windscreen. I really should have cleaned it before we set off on this journey. And we're leaving council now about to come into Rendlesham. And Rendlesham was a big estate during the 19th century and had a magnificent house here. But sadly, this was one of the country houses that just didn't survive the Second World War. It was requisitioned, and again, after the war, society had sort of moved on and there was no space for these old houses. This is one of the lodge gates to the original Rendlesham Hall, and to our left, we come to the roundabout, is the domestic side of the base, which is where a lot of servicemen live. But to our right, we'll explore that first. We're going to have a look at what is now an industrial park, but was the military area. So we'll come through. And you'll see a lot of this infrastructure still here, so we'll actually be going through the main gates and the guard post. I think nowadays the guards that operate here are obviously civilians, so they're no longer armed, which is good. We're looking across to where the runway used to be. This is the perimeter track, and you probably see some of the hangars out there. Control tower ahead of us. There is a World War, sorry, I'll start again. There is a Cold War museum on site. Quite a lot of film work is done here as well, but it's now home to a lot of local manufacturing and tech firms. And if I turn you round, get to see some of the aircraft which have been brought into the Cold War Museum as static exhibits. But this is a museum which is certainly worth having a look at if you come to this part of Suffolk. I'm not sure if you can see, but ahead of us is one of the A10 tank busters. So we've just stopped here, and just give you a sort of quick look of what I can see. So we'll make our way up towards this wonderful aircraft here, which was known as the Warthog, I believe. I mean, it's a bit ungainly compared to some of the more elegant aircraft, such as the F-15s and F-14s, but this A10 tank buster would have been a common sight in the skies over this part of Suffolk 30 years ago. In the background I can see we've got a Harrier jump jet, various others. I'm not a great expert on aircraft, so I'm not sure what the Royal Navy aircraft here is, but you can see these vehicles, including the hospital bus right at the back, have obviously been acquired by the Cold War Museum, and they're currently static exhibits, of course, but I think the idea is to try to restore them. And then just over here there's an aircraft tug. I think the Americans call it a bobtail. Again, I don't know if that's the correct term for it, but yeah, I'll just give you a sort of a look around the base as we go. It's a haunting place. Looking across to the control tower, and of course beyond the fence that you can see is where the runway would have been. So we're looking down the perimeter track at this point. Just walk down. So if you haven't seen Vitesse before, this is my 1967 Mark 1 2-litre Vitesse, and yeah, she's been with me for about 10 years now, and in the summer she's my daily driver, but we've done a lot of miles together, and yeah, wonderful car to drive. How about that? Anyway, enough about Tess. I'll give you an idea. There's a landscape beyond. Just over there, there's a building right in the distance. I'll see if we can zoom in on it. It's hidden by the caravans, but there's some very poignant graffiti, and it says POWs and MIAs, you are not forgotten. And this is a useful reminder that the Vietnam War, although it didn't sort of directly involve the United Kingdom or UK forces, there were people who lived and worked in Suffolk whose lives were deeply affected by the Vietnam conflict. And yes, it's a poignant memorial to those people. Right, what we'll do, we'll jump back in Tess and I'm going to take you to have a look at the domestic part of the base, so you can see where the personnel and their families all lived, and we'll have a little drive along the perimeter track as we go. See you then. Come down to the end here, and we'll turn around. What we'll do next is I'm going to take you onto the domestic side of the base, just show you a little bit of that, so that you can see where the American Air Force personnel lived. I should just explain that when the base was sold off after '92, a lot of property developers moved in, and so there's a lot of new housing. The American housing stock was sold off to British families, but there are still features that are typically American, and it's just interesting sort of contrast. So we'll come through onto the estate. So you can see these houses and maisonettes here were again part of the housing stock for military families. All of this is obviously much more recent, but what I'm hoping to do is take you to a place called Suffolk Drive, and you'll get a glimpse of a small piece of American suburbia. In the middle of Suffolk. So here we go. I'm not sure if it's still there, but there was an American fire hydrant along the pavement or sidewalk here. So stop sign, I'm sure that comes from the early days. And these are the houses, and you'll see very typically you have the sort of road, but then the sort of side driveways which allow children to play safely without risk of being run over. right at the far end of this road was the base commander's house, and I remember being very impressed when I went in a previous life to inspect the property sometime in about 1994, to find there was actually a telephone in the base commander's shower. I guess if anything kicked off, they needed to be able to get hold of him wherever he was. And this was the number 2, but the base commander's bungalow is over here, and we'll just turn into his carport like so. Well, background, yeah. So again, I imagine that the more senior officers and their families was housed at this end. Yep, there's a fire hydrant just in front of us here, and a proper American fire hydrant. So there was a theatre, obviously school, and a hospital, all on this site at one time. I should explain to people who don't know that stop signs are fairly rare in the UK. We tend to have give way signs, so these stop signs are very much an American legacy. And then for anyone who might have lived in Watersfield Park, I'll just take you through here so you can have a look. These were the last of the houses to be built before the closure of the base, and they've only been up a matter of a couple of years, I think, when the decision was made to withdraw. So in Suffolk now, we've gone from having 4 USAF bases to just 2, which are on the other side of the county, which we'll go and visit on another day, and those namely Lakenheath and Mildenhall, which are home to the Strike Eagles. Well, there we go. That was a quick tour around RAF Bentwaters, and I hope it was interesting, something perhaps a little bit different. And if it's somewhere which is familiar to you, then please drop me a note in the comments. I'd love to hear from you.